Police and the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service. Until the legislation is passed, the GCSB's ability to help important private sector companies with the rising threat of cyber attack is also unclear. This needs to be resolved. The public will have a chance to have its say, and rightly so, but for a reduced period of time.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to oppose the motion that has been put forward by the Minister. The 2-month period that has been suggested here is woefully inadequate to give members of the public the opportunity that they need to have a say on such significant legislation. Mr Speaker, the Minister has just told the House that this is the lack of ability for the GCSB to continue to assist other agencies is hamstringing it from important activities. Well, Mr Speaker, if timeliness is the issue here, we know that in at least July last year the Prime Minister knew that there were issues with unlawful spying, and then in September, according to statements that the Prime Minister has made, the kind of activities that are being talked about here were ceased. So if there was an urgency that requires only a 2-month period, why was legislation not introduced in September last year? In order to justify such a truncated select committee process, the government needs to answer the question of how it is that when they have been aware of this since at least September last year, actually July last year in the case of the Prime Minister, that they did not act at that point. They have introduced legislation to the House today which has not been adequately scrutinised by anybody, Mr Speaker, and they put that legislation in front of the House and asked for an exception to grant them only a 2-month committee process. The gravity of the issues involved here in terms of personal privacy, in terms of human rights, and in terms of our national security are such that it is simply impossible that a 2-month select committee process would be able to take that on board. I imagine many New Zealanders will want to make a submission to this bill, and to only have a 2-month period guarantees that the voice of a lot of New Zealanders will not be heard in the select committee process. Mr Speaker, I want to speak too about the nature of this particular committee and its relationship to this truncated select committee process. This Intelligence and Security Committee is unique in our Parliament. It is constituted in a different way from all other select committees, to the point, Mr Speaker, that members cannot be substituted on this committee. So in such a truncated period, will members of the committee actually all be available to hear submissions? I'm not certain that they will, and there is no capacity to have a member substituted on. Can the government guarantee in this House today that the Prime Minister will be present throughout the submission process? Can they guarantee that in the House? Because if they can't, Mr Speaker, then New Zealanders are being denied their right to participate in discussion on this legislation in front of a full committee. I certainly, Mr Speaker, in terms of the Labour Party's representative on that committee, David Shearer, in this 2-month period, it is a very busy period. We've just had the Prime Minister announce today that the Ikaroa-Rāwhiti by-election will be held on the 29th of June. Now, the National Party isn't participating in that by-election, Mr Speaker, but this is a period of time which is extremely busy. It's a committee that operates in quite a different way from other committees in the House. And I don't think sending a piece of legislation to that committee for only 2 months is satisfactory. We know that there will now have to be submissions called for. That will be a very narrow window for people to put submissions in. And then a very narrow window for those submissions to be heard. There are issues that are raised in this legislation, Mr Speaker, that may well be of a confidential nature. People who want to make submissions to the committee may well have issues that they need to raise that will be of a confidential nature. What processes are going to be set up to allow that to happen, to allow people to have an adequate say? We heard in the earlier debate, Mr Speaker, both sides of this argument talk about the significance of what was being done here, that there were significant changes to the way in which the GCSB would be acting, and yet the government has put up a motion that says we only need 2 months to do this. That is not consistent with what we know about when the government was informed about unlawful spying. The urgency with which this has been put through simply does not match the process of events that took place last year. And I will rehearse those again, Mr Speaker, because it is relevant to the question of how long this committee should have to assess this bill. If it's true that the GCSB itself became aware in May last year of unlawful spying, well, February initially, that's right, February initially, and then they swept it under the carpet. Then in May they returned to the matter with when the Inspector General raised concerns. Then in July, Ian Fletcher decided it was time to let the Prime Minister know about the unlawful spying, and nothing happened at that point, Mr Speaker. Nothing happened along the way there to say, this is a hugely urgent matter, we better get a bill in front of Parliament and rush it through. That didn't happen. And then between July and September, it appeared the Prime Minister was happy enough to see the GCSB continue to operate under the existing law. He didn't seem concerned about the information that he'd been told about unlawful spying. But in September, the game was up, Mr Speaker, because finally the GCSB and the Prime Minister had to come clean about what had happened in the Kim.com case. At that point, if a bill had been introduced to this House and said, we've got to get this through quickly, because we've got to make sure that the GCSB can continue to do the work it's been doing on behalf of other agencies, that would make some logical sense. But that didn't happen, Mr Speaker. Nothing happened until today, when a bill was introduced to Parliament. And the Minister stands up and moves a motion that says there only needs to be 2 months' worth of consideration by a committee that is restricted in the way that it operates. Mr Speaker, I simply do not believe that that is adequate for this piece of legislation. I believe that the people of New Zealand, when we are dealing with issues of such sensitivity, when we are dealing with an agency with intrusive and significant powers that operates in an opaque manner, that the people of New Zealand deserve a proper process for this piece of legislation. And I have not heard anything advanced today by the government, most especially in the recent contribution by the Minister, that actually indicates why this urgency is required. Because if it had been required, Mr Speaker, we would have seen legislation in September last year. And the fact that it has been referred to a committee that operates, and as David Shearer has already said to the House today, in a way that I think is woefully inadequate in terms of parliamentary oversight, that committee has only then been given 2 months to do its work. So, Mr Speaker, I believe strongly that this legislation deserves full scrutiny by this Parliament, and New Zealanders deserve an opportunity to make submissions and know that if they request to be heard by this committee, that they will be heard. And with a 2-month window, it is simply not credible that all the New Zealanders who will want to be heard on this bill will be able to be heard on this bill. That is only possible with a full select committee process. And Mr Speaker, the Labour Party is on record as saying we need a full inquiry into the intelligence agencies. The severity of the change here actually indicates that that inquiry is needed more than ever. But in the absence of the government agreeing to that inquiry, this select committee process on this bill is the only opportunity that New Zealanders have to actually have their say. And I think the government needs to think again about how it is treating these issues. These issues are about the balance in our society between the fundamental freedoms that New Zealanders expect, the fact that they can go about their business without the intrusion of the state, against our national security. And those are weighty matters, and I accept the need in our society for these kinds of agencies. But without New Zealanders having confidence that the checks and balances are in place, we run the risk of totally undermining the confidence New Zealanders have in our security intelligence agencies, which is at an all-time low now, I would suggest, Mr Speaker. Nothing that the government is doing today will increase that confidence. It will simply decrease it. The idea that they are ramming through under urgency this first reading, and the idea that they are putting in place a truncated select committee process simply fuels the view of many New Zealanders that this government is trying to sweep under the carpet the problems, the debacle at the GCSB and the role of the Prime Minister in it. Democracy is not being served today, Mr Speaker, by a truncated select committee process to a committee that does not operate properly. I urge the government to reconsider this motion and I oppose it.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, I'm surprised that no one from the government is prepared